Hello and welcome to episode number 5 of Casting Shadows. As always, I'm your host Jeremy here with AK. AK, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Also, quick announcement. We have 2 microphones now, so the audio should be vastly improved. I know some people said that I was too quiet or Jeremy was too quiet. That's just because it was hard to do with one mic because I had to pick up both of us. But now with 2 mics, we shouldn't have that problem. So
Yeah, I'm definitely hoping that's going to be a little bit better. I would have to go in through editing and literally split our audio. Now this time, when we cough, if one of us coughs, I'll be able to actually delete that out.
yeah.
But today, we have a couple interesting topics. The first one we wanted to start off with is sequencing and how important it is in Death Shadow. Just the other weekend, we were at our local game store, Game Storm, and I played actually the Grixis Death Shadow mirror. Now, obviously, it was on Grixis Death Shadow, and he made a costly move in the first game that kind of basically cost him the game. He played a Death Shadow. It's going to be a big Death Shadow. Was not going to be able to deal with it, and then he Inquisition. So, in response, Fatal push your Death Shadow, and then you can look at my hand and take, I think I had like a Snapcaster or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to start off with you, talk about how important sequencing is. Obviously, I just gave that example. There's so many more examples of how important sequencing needs to be in Death Shadow because basically how efficient the deck needs to be.
Yeah, Death Shadow is one of those decks that really demands perfect play. You have to really take your lines seriously and walk yourself through them before you even do them. You know, not saying decks like Burn or Jund or, let's say like Ad Nauseam. Those are very complex decks in their own right, Ad Nauseam especially. But you're kind of playing solitaire, Jund you don't. Jund's very interactive. But Jund's very like, you do one thing and you do one thing really good and then you play another good card and you play another good card. Because Jund essentially is just, the best of the color pie and color combos mashed together. And it works. It's a great deck. And Ad Nauseam's a complex combo deck. But Death Shadow is like Jund, where it's the good cards in their respective rights in blue and black and red. But it also has that combo-y finish with Temur Battle Rage and Death Shadow. But then you have tons of cards that cost 1 to 0 mana. And it demands you to play perfectly. And like the example that you said where he Inquisitioned after he played it, that's something that I would never do. Because you always look at the opponent's hand and see what they have, take it out, and then you're able to play your Shadow, knowing you're safe. That being said, if you had a Snapcaster, I think you'd have to wait a whole extra turn too, because then you're probably going to snap Fatal Push. I'm not sure how much mana you had open. Do you remember?
I don't even want to say for sure that I had a Snapcaster in my hand.
Okay.
It could have been. I don't exactly remember what I had in my hand, but I know for sure that I had no way of dealing with it other than that Fatal Push that I used on him.
Yeah, the mirror is very complex. The mirror is like the closest to Legacy you're going to get, in my opinion. Because I played Legacy for a bit, just on online MTGO, and then I know Untapped is a pretty fun site you can play Legacy at. And then sometimes in my old local game store, when I used to play back in Florida, Legacy is very, very efficient in the sense that you have to think about things like 3 turns ahead. And that's why I equate Death Shadow, that you have to sequence your draws correctly and sequence your plays correctly as well. Because if you don't, it could punish you immensely, and that's what happened to him. And I don't blame him. He's probably not a bad player. I've actually seen the player you're talking about. He's a pretty skilled player. I got my butt handed to him with Crabvine. He completely annihilated me. I think he milled over 3 creeping shells with like 1 Stitcher supplier. It was it was brutal, but he's a great player. But even the great players make little mistakes all the time. And the thing with Death Shadow though, you make a little mistake and it's going to cost you.
When you're already riding that fine line of health, when you're trying to just bring it down, like any of those costly mistakes, or just basically could end the game. And like you said, I know he's a good pilot. It's just a simple mistake that he made that I've made so many simple mistakes. It's so easy to make a mistake playing Death Shadow because it's one of the most people in the modern community say that it's one of the toughest decks to play.
Yeah, I actually saw a Channel Fireball article maybe about a year ago and it listed the hardest decks in modern to play, and I believe Death Shadow was number 1 because it's just so complex. You have to balance your life total. You have to manage your resources with fetches and shocks. You have to know when to fetch and shock. You have to know when to cycle your street rates and when not to. When to Thoughtseize, when not to. And I think the first turn is kind of like the easiest because you're able to fetch, shock, Thoughtseize. Like that's like in your head. But then that line of play is complicated like twice more if you have a bauble and an extra fetch land. It's like, okay, do I go look for a threat? If I don't have a threat, do I need a threat right now, or can I wait a little bit? What am I playing against? It's hard, but the deck really demands you to sequence properly. I think a thing that Michael Rapp said about Street Wraith as well is I see people cycling Street Wraith when they don't have to, meaning that, like, oh, I'm going to cycle Street Wraith end of turn. Like, you should hold on to it. You never know what you could draw, or you could use it as a combat trick. But, like, if you need to look for your threat or you need a very specific card, then go ahead and cycle it. But you should hold on to your Street Wraiths, be a little more conservative with them, because sometimes you can blow people out of the water by cycling Street Wraith, and then all of a sudden Battle Rage. And then they're kind of like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But if they have that knowing of, like, oh my god, Death Shadow is huge, then they're kind of a little more on the cautious end, But sequencing is very hard, and I do agree that, it's tough to get into that mind state of, like, I need to sequence my draws when all you want to do is play. You want to go fetch land, shock land, boom, Death Shadow, kill you. But it's a deck that really demands you to play to your most, your top level, so to speak, your prime. And also, I know people say, like, the meta ebbs and flows, and that's correct. And Death Shadow, especially Grixis Death Shadow, might not be the best deck in the format at the moment right now, for sure. But if you're a player who's looking for a challenge, you have double the challenge now. You have to, one, master a deck that's completely extremely skill intensive, and you have to really sit down and think about everything you do. And then two, you have to do it in a meta where everything hates you. You have to do it where, like, Bant Stoneblade is like 40 cards. That's virtually insane against Grixis Death Shadow. So if any modern player is looking for a big challenge, I would definitely focus on Grixis Death Shadow to challenge yourself to see if I'm able to master this deck and then win with it too. Because you can win with it, but it's challenging for sure.
I think one of the hardest things about Grixis Death Shadow is sometimes decks require you to think about the turn. I think GDS kind of requires you to think not only about this turn, but turns after. Because you're trying to do stuff this turn, but you're like, what if I get blown out by this card, which you could have next turn? Or you're trying to think, should I do this turn to set up my next turn? Like, I think that's part of the reasons why it's so difficult to play, is you kind of have to think about more turns than just the turn that you're on.
I think, yeah. I think because the rule of thumb is when you're playing Magic, you have to think at least 3 turns ahead, right? So if you're playing Jund, you play your Tarmogoyf, you have to think about the third turn. 3 turns from now, what am I going to do? And vice versa. If you're playing Burn or Blue-Eye Control, you have to think about that. I argue with GDS, you have to think like at least 6 turns ahead. You have to think about, what if he top decks a Bolt and I'm screwed? What if he has a Snapcaster, you could Snap Fatal Push? Like, you have to really think about your draws and how they're going to affect you. You're going to have to think, like, what if I don't draw into a threat and I draw into nothing but air? How am I going to come after this? How am I going to rebuild after my board gets wiped by the Supreme Verdict? Because there's some stuff that's inevitable when you're facing an opponent, like Blue-Eye Control or Bant Stoneblade or something like that. They have these fail-safes that it's coming. You have no way of dealing with it. Like, or Tron lands a Worm Coil. It's like, how am I going to beat this with no Culligan's Command in my hand right now? So think about those plays and envision those plays. And then so when they come to you, they're not like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, okay, I thought about this. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's my out. And if you lose, that's okay, because you can always get better next time. I think it's a really important thing, is losing and knowing that when you lose, it's not the end of the world. I think that's actually a little subject I want to talk about a little bit more, is losing with Grixis Death Shadow and losing in Magic in general, especially in Modern. I'm sure you heard the big Ninja tweet this week about Ninja saying that if you lose and you don't get mad, you're cheating yourself. You're supposed to get mad and lose. And I know the MTG community kind of clowned on him pretty hard, and a lot of people clowned on him because, it felt kind of like, I disagree with that sentiment immensely. Like, you don't have to get mad when you lose. You can lose with grace and lose with dignity and be like, what, I lost because of XYZ, and I'm going to do this better next time. Most Magic players, when you sit down with them and you ask them how they beat you, they'll straight up tell you, and they'll give you really in-depth analysis and, like, how they beat you, or like what they did or what they sided in against you. I encourage that. Talk to your opponents at your LGS, see how they're playing, and then get to know them, and then, like, you can learn learn their decks and they can learn yours, and everyone wins in the end. You know, because when they go off and play some other tournament, now they're going to have the skill set that beat Grace's Dash Shadow. And we go off and play another tournament, we're going to have the skill set to beat whatever deck they're playing. You know, I think losing with dignity and grace is very important, and losing creates character, and you get better by losing. So,
and it doesn't solve anything by getting mad at it. Like, if I lose 0-2 and be like, well, that was just stupid. Like, I shouldn't have lost. But, like, I've learned so much just sitting by losing, basically. Like, I'll lose, and then I'll sit there with my opponent after, and they'll be like, so why did you do this when you could have did this? And I'm like, oh, you know what? I actually didn't think about that. Mm-hmm. Like, that would have been the better line, because then they'd be like, well, if you would have did this, you could have did this. And then I'm kind of on the defensive. So it's, like you said, it's really important to just kind of talk to your opponent and gain a lot of information, because I've learned so much through losing that they have explained to me why I did or why I shouldn't have done what I did. And then I've basically learned from that. And like you said, it develops character. Because of that, I've learned how to be a better GDS pilot. That's not to say one of the best pilots out there. That's definitely not true. But I'm always constantly learning through other people.
Yeah.
Even when I play like the mirror or play against you, it really requires me to think harder about what I need to do with this deck. And then basically, like I said, it's just they're teaching you, which is really nice.
Yeah, especially, and that goes for any deck in Modern or any deck in Magic that you're playing. You know, losing is a part of the game. We're all going to do it. We're all not going to go into a tournament and go easy mode and crush the opponents and everything. Because honestly, that's boring. Like, always winning is boring. I know it sounds sacrilegious, but like, I want to challenge when I'm playing. If I wanted boring, I could just, you know, teach my 8-year-old nephew how to play and then crush him every 20 seconds. But I'm not going to do that, you know. I want to challenge myself, and I lose a couple times. That's okay, you know. Like, you're talking to the guy who went many a nights going 0-3 drop at their local LGS in the Modern tournaments, you know, and it feels rough sometimes because you invest time, you invest money into these decks, you invest practicing, and then you get blown out of the water. And then what's aggravating too is you know that your deck can function well. You've seen it function well. Mm-hmm. But then when the time arises, it's like your deck's like nowhere to be found. Like it turns it back on you. So losing with Shadow and losing in general in Modern is not the end of the world. And I hope everyone knows that. And I hope everyone goes into it with a positive attitude that you can get better by losing. You know, you build character and you get better. And that's how you succeed, you know.
And losing with GDS is so easy.
Oh, it's very easy.
And sometimes the deck can kind of betray you. I talked about that with you. That first round I played Amulet Titan. Game 1, I had the perfect hand. And it was just 1 fetch land, 2 Street Wraith, a Bauble, Thought Scour, Gurmag Angler. I forgot what the other card was. Turn 2 Gurmag... Oh, it was a Battle Rage. Mm-hmm. So I eventually got the second land, turn 2 Gurmag Angler, and then swung for 5, and then next turn swung for 10. Next turn swung for 5, and I drew into a Culligan's Command, finished him off with that. And I was like, wow, I love this deck.
Yeah.
Game 2, I went the entire 6 to 7 turns that I played against them without finding not even a Snapcaster Mage. Mm-hmm. So it's humbling sometimes, because that first time I was like, wow, like this is awesome. Then the second time I was like, wow, this sucks.
Yeah,
but
no,
it's just so easy because you're so light on threats that it's bound to happen to you. And sometimes it's out of your control. It's not something you can do, but there's no point in getting mad at it. Just realize that my opponent was able to find everything that he needed faster than I was, and he played it really well. He played stuff around what he thought I might have had, because obviously I was going a couple turns without really doing anything, so he was playing against that. So he piloted well, and he ended up beating me. And that comes with the territory of Grixis Death Shadow.
Yes, I agree how you said it's very easy to lose with Grixis Death Shadow. I think out of all the decks in Modern, you can definitely lose the most easiest with Shadow decks, because you're thinking like, oh, I'll fetch willy-nilly and then like big Death Shadow, but like if they have like a billion Fatal Pushes or Assassin's Trophies or something, or Path to Exile, you're going to get blown out of the water real quick. You know, I think it's just so punishing. There's not a deck that's more rewarding when you play it personally. Like when you play it and it functions right, it feels insane. But when it turns its back on you, you feel like the biggest clown in the world. When you Thought Scour your Gurmag Angler into the graveyard and draw a useless Water Grave when you already have like 5 lands in the battlefield, you know. So it's definitely those moments, you know. So the deck as a whole is very rewarding, but can be punishing. Like I said, losing with Grixis Death Shadow and losing in general in Modern and in Magic too shouldn't be a bad thing. When you lose, it's a learning experience. I think one of my favorite quotes is from Batman Begins when Alfred says, "It's not how many times we fall, Master Wayne. It's how we pick ourselves up." So I don't. I could be messing up that quote, by the way, so don't take it verbatim. But I think that line really affected me because when you lose, people are going to remember how you acted afterwards. Are you going to be that salt master who puts his cards away right away and walks away and gets all aggravated? Who makes up excuses like, oh, well, this is a bad matchup, or, like, I think that you kind of misled me in this direction, but if you tell yourself, like, no, I don't think I played that well, and it is a rough matchup, but, like, how do you think I can get better doing this, People love to talk about their decks, in Modern especially. They love their decks, and they are perfectly willing to sit down with you and tell you, like, well, this card's really great against you. This card is not that well against you. If you would have did this, then I would have been screwed, kind of thing. Like you said, like, you have to talk with your opponents. Most are very friendly, especially if you guys are grinding away at your FNMs or local tournaments and stuff like that. Most players at that level are willing to talk to you and be friendly, because we're all Magic players and we're all there to have fun at the end of the day, especially if it's like a $8, $10, $20 tournament. No one's going to be like super spiky aggravated. There's probably that one guy who is super spiky, but don't worry about him.
And I think one of the most important things to do when you lose, not only with GDS, but in just in Modern or Standard or whatever you play in general, is ask yourself why you lost. That's what I try to, before, I would never get like mad. I just get like disappointed with myself, but I would never like show disrespect towards the other player. But now I'm realizing that just doesn't help me.
Yeah.
Now, like, I'll wish him good luck, and then if we go our separate ways, I'll think, well, so is there anything I could have done that would have changed the course of the game? Was it just bad draws, or did I misplay? Did I play this when I shouldn't have played this? Did I not play this and should have played this?
Yeah.
There's so many avenues that you need to explore to kind of see why you lost, and then basically just kind of take notes so that you can improve next time and not make those same mistakes.
Yeah, I recommend that's actually a great idea. Bring yourself a little notebook and take notes. Write down what matchup you had. Write down, like, was it an easy 2-0? Or did you put up a hard fight? Or did they clobber you? Like, I remember sitting down and someone goes, Mountain, Simian Spirit Guide, Blood Moon. And I was like, okay, well, I lost this game. So stuff like that, is kind of like, you're gonna have those moments in Modern where you lose like that, someone's gonna go Chalice of the Void, someone's gonna go Ensnaring Bridge, and you're like, well, I can't beat that, and that's it, But it's important just to realize how you lost and why you lost, like you said. Ask yourself those questions. I did actually write an article on this, by the way, if anyone's wondering. Not to toot my own horn, but I will put a link in the description about my article. It's called Losing with Grixis Death Shadow, and it's all about what we're talking about today. Like, it's important to pick yourself up after you lose and then come back stronger, and you can get those wins and get those turn 2 Gamma Anglers, hopefully,
And also, kind of just keep track, like you said, take notes of the decks that you play. Keep track of sideboard cards that you think did good in the matchup, did bad in the matchup. Because I know when I first started playing, there was a lot of decks that I like knew kind of what they were, but not how each piece worked. And now that I'm starting to learn more, and that was because of the cards that I thought about in the deck, and then looking at my sideboard cards, thinking of, would this be good against them? You just basically take notes, because there's going to be sideboard cards that are obviously good against some decks that are bad against other decks. That way it kind of helps you keep track. Because I know sometimes you can get kind of nervous and you're just like, well, I'm going to sideboard this. And like, you didn't really think about it. So just kind of take that time to think about it. And then after you finish that game, you thought, well, did that really do anything against them? If not, then maybe I won't side that next time. And just,
for sure,
especially like the newer pilots, because obviously you're going to look at some cards and be like, okay, so is this going to be good against this matchup? That's why it was important when I first started playing Grixis that I just kind of took those notes. Figure out which cards are good against which decks, and then just kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to get better and become a better person and everything. And like I said, become a better Magic player and Shadow Pilot, But brings me to our next topic I want to talk about is trying new things in Death Shadow decks, especially GDS, and experimenting with them. and why this is such like a taboo in the community, and why we should get rid of this stigma and start trying new things. The deck hasn't changed a whole lot from roughly like, I would say like 2 years ago. Would you say? Just about right.
I would agree with that.
We went from having like one looting in the yard and two Jaces, Vryn's Prodigy, and now we have, instead of that, we have like main deck Royal Scions, a John the Lock, and then that's pretty much it. We'll up a Thought Scour.
Basically, the core has always stayed the same.
Yeah.
It's basically those flex spots that have changed during the time.
Mm-hmm. And I think like this is tough because like GDS is such a finely tuned built machine, right? It functions on an axis that is very like demanding, and there's very core cards you can't change. You can't change 4 Street Wraith. You can't change 4 Death Shadow, obviously. You can't change the mana base really, besides switching between a Scalding Tarn and a extra Blood Crypt. Like those are very staples of the deck, but there's still a lot of part of the deck that you can kind of play with. Gurmag Anglers you can kind of play with, Baubles you can play with. I think we need to be encouraging of people to going to events and trying new things and becoming, like, you never know. I remember thinking about decks and thinking about these wacky ideas I had when I first started playing Modern, like all those, I'm pretty sure we all had those moments like, wow, this would be really good if I could build this. And then you end up getting your face smashed in, and so you kind of like...
And it maybe worked once.
And it worked once, yeah, at the kitchen table playing with your buddy before a tournament. Mine was Desecration Demon. I thought that card was insane with Pentab Prism, because I'm like, I could cheat out on turn 3. And I'm like, yeah, but it can just get fatal pushed. Like, the tempo play is insane, I remember I had like a mono black devotion deck. It was terrible. But, with GDS, I feel like there used to be a lot of experimenting in the community and us trying new things and, kind of really like trying to find new ways to win or new cool cards. But we really don't have that anymore. Now it's kind of like we're stuck. We're a little stagnant, I feel like.
Basically, like right now, the only things that change usually are the sideboard cards.
Yeah. That's really it. The sideboard is the fluid part, but the main deck really never changes. Like I saw Dilla Donegan's list. He won, I think it was last weekend, and he had only 2 Snapcasters in the deck, and he had main deck 2 Serum Visions. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like a kind of a dunce after I talked all that trash about Serum Visions on air, and then he goes and kind of slaughters everyone with this, maybe a little more unique spin on things, back to Serum Visions. I thought that was kind of cool. And I feel like we should encourage more stuff like that. Don't be afraid. I think we all have pet cards we want to kind of try in GDS. I think my pet card is Rotting Register, or Regisar. I love that card. It's a 3-mana 7/6. Why don't we play this thing? I think it's the coolest card ever. And I'm sorry, but Unearth plus Riding Regisar in the graveyard sounds insane. 1 mana 7/6. Oh, we have to discard? Who cares? We have a 7/6. This game is going to be over in a matter of minutes.
Even if you are discarding, if you're still playing Gurmag Angler, that kind of just helps the graveyard for it.
It fills it right back up, So, I don't know. So, if anyone wants to break that card in GTS, please be my guest. It's 3 mana from, what was it, M20, I think?
I think so.
M20, Riding Registar. And it's such a cool card.
You got 3 copies ready and rearing to go if you do this.
I just think, like, man, because... in my head, I have this line of play, right? Turn 1, Thought Scour. I mill over Regisar. Turn 2, Unearth it. And I have Stub ready to go to protect it. And then turn 3, Battle Rage. That's 14 damage. How is that not something we want in GDS? Like, that's exactly what we want to be doing. But I've tried that card, and I just get rammed with it every time. I don't do good with it. If someone else could break it. Like I said, I think I miss... when the community was really trying to do new things. And I think those are really cool. Like we tried Sleight of Hands, we tried Delvers, we tried like Rise and Fall, like these crazy cool cards that I think, I think we should start experimenting again. Not necessarily with those cards, not necessarily saying that Rotting Registar is the end all be all of experimental cards, but like go out there and start building new builds and taking it to tournaments and seeing how you do. Worst case scenario, you lose. So what? Blame it on us. And then you can just come back and go with the stock list and then do well again. But I do think that growth is important for decks, especially for their survival. So we can't get stuck too much in this stagnated way of thinking and stuff. Not saying that we are like stuck or anything. There's always new people sharing their inputs on a deck or their list or what they're trying. Like I said, that Discord I have, or Discord that Michael Rap has that I'm involved in, is a fantastic way to learn information. People are always exchanging information and getting to know each other and stuff like that and sharing information. I think that's awesome. I think if we can apply that to like trying new cards, that'd be really cool.
And I think basically all the decks in Magic have come from somewhere. They've come from experimentation, and like
That was really deep. They come from somewhere.
whatever. When Faithless Looting got banned and Arclight Phoenix kind of got pushed out of the meta, they still experimented with a prowess kind of style deck that relied on playing a bunch of spells just without Arclight Phoenix, without that graveyard strategy, and it's having success. And that came from someone that basically just had the idea of, let me try this. And I think that Death Shadow can kind of do that too. Just, what's the worst that can happen? I waste $5-6 at an FNM or something and get stomped. Like, let me try this and see if it works. That GDS player that I played, that I talked about earlier about, he was playing Unearth. And we talked afterwards, and in the game, the second game, he was really trying to find a threat ad. And all he had were Thought Scours. He was Thought Scouring to hopefully hit a Death Shadow because his health was so low, he was going to Unearth it.
Yeah.
And I do like that because it's another kind of spin on GDS that he's trying to Unearth Death Shadow. And like, how good would that feel? One black mana, bring that back from the graveyard. Like, even if you fatal
with
push
Thought
it.
Scour, yeah.
You fatal push it or something. Okay, let me Unearth it back. Like, it brings that.
You can always cycle it away too if you don't need it. That's the power. I remember when Unearth got spoiled, people like, this is a 3 of in Death Shadow, but just sucks because Gurmag Angler obviously isn't unearthable.
Yeah. And then unearthing Snapcaster doesn't really feel as good either.
What are you talking about? That feels great.
Well, I guess
you get the trigger.
You don't have to pay the 2 mana.
Exactly. You get it's Snapcaster for 1 mana, and then it triggers happen, and you can flash something back. So Unearth, Snap, push.
I'd actually feel a lot better in playing Snapcaster because then you could fatal push for 2 mana instead of 3 mana with Snapcaster.
It's pretty, it's really good. Also, you could Snapcaster, Unearth Snapcaster, and just go on a loop. It would be kind of cool. But Unearth was another cool card I want to try for sure. Like I said, Unearth with Riding Registrar, please, people, make it happen. Like, I don't know, maybe I'll build a really janky list and take it to a LGS or a modern tournament and get my face kicked in, and then you guys laugh at me. But you know what? If I win, I'm just saying, you heard it here first. 3 mana, 7/6, pretty good.
I want that card to work so bad.
I know, it's such a cool card. But yeah, experimentation in the GDS community, Death Shadow community, and just Modern in general is what makes Modern so great and so fun. Another reason why I quit playing, or a reason why I quit playing Standard, was because it became very stagnant. Like when a new set comes out, it's super fun. You get all these cool cards and you're trying to build like these cool decks. But then when the format kind of starts to slow down and sets stop releasing and the rotation's not for a while, the top decks are top decks, not going to change. Like when Oko was still in Standard, it was all Sultai food or Bant food, and it was just like all the food decks. And then when Energy was in Standard, it was the energy decks, but Modern's like a top deck this week, 2 weeks from now, it can get like pushed out of the meta and another deck comes back. You never know what stuff, and especially with the card pool that we have, you can definitely change things up for sure.
And it allows for that creativity because there's so many people that are creative about different kind of style decks, and whether it doesn't matter what format it is really. It just allows for people to be like, well, let me try this and this and see if it works. I've seen so many decks at GameStorm that it's like, I've never even heard of this style deck, but they're putting it together because of that creativity. They're trying something new.
Yeah.
And it's having success. And I think that's what is great about Magic, is that it allows for that creativity. You start thinking about synergies and you start thinking about all these color combinations and trying to put together something that actually works. And I think that's what we enjoy the most, is trying to put together a deck.
Yeah.
Usually sometimes doesn't always pan out, but it's just, like I said, it allows for that creativity, and it's really fun.
It is really fun. But speaking of the meta, the next subject I want to talk about was Bant Stoneblade. It's starting to pop up a lot more and more aggressively, and it's a matchup I think GDS struggles with immensely, and we have to start preparing for it. So this being said, we're going to take a look at some of the Stoneblade lists that Jeremy will probably put on the screen or in links in the description. But we're getting lists off of MTG Goldfish and stuff like that. But if you're not familiar with the deck, Bant Stoneblade features the colors blue, green, and white, and then some sideboard red, be careful with that. People will get got by that. But a lot of these Bant Stoneblade decks actually feature Blood Moon in the sideboard to shut down Titan strategies, but can also be boarded into us because our mana base is very greedy. So be wary of that. But Bant Stoneblade is, like Michael Rapp said in Discord a couple of days ago, it's just 40 cards. That's like insane against Death Shadow decks. Like you have Teferi to shut down on counter spells, to bounce our Gurmag Anglers. You have Path to Exile, take out any of our threats, and stuff like that. So you're able to. It's really hard for you to come back from all these threats and stuff like that because they're so. Jace the Mind Sculptor is also a nightmare to play against with the 0 over and over. It's hard. I know Jeremy's laughing at me right now because he's just picturing me like wanting to cry against Jace the Mind Sculptor, but it's rough sometimes because once Stoneblade gets that lock on you and they go searching for their battle skulls or their swords, they can get protection. And I think GDS struggles with this matchup immensely. And I know I have a close friend with the Shadow community. His name is Eric Fines. He's always asked me questions on Bant Stoneblades. This little segment's especially for him too. And I hope everyone else who's having some rough time with Bant Stoneblade could take from this and be able to get better at the matchup. So, Jeremy, right off the top of your head, what comes to mind when it comes to sideboard cards to try to beat Bant Stoneblade?
This definitely is really hard to face off against them because it combines elements that Shadow struggles against. It's always struggled against control style decks. Azorius control from before when it was popular in the meta. That Shadow just didn't have. If it didn't end quickly, then control was probably going to run away with the game eventually because they had so many counter spells, they had so many planeswalkers, and now they're adding this element with Stoneblade or Stoneforge Mystic, that they can end the game quicker, not through complete lockout or control aspects.
With spell quellers too now.
Spell quellers that can take any of your spells. And then if you get the sort of Feast of Famine that gives you protection from black, now Fatal Push, Dismember, that's all shut off. Some of your key cards.
That's a removal package.
Yeah, Drama
really.
the Lock will be shut off.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm trying to think because that's actually really hard. I'm trying to think of like my sideboard here.
I think Mystical Dispute's
That's
a real
what I was
shiner
thinking
in
of
this
right
one.
away.
But Mystical Dispute's a good because it hits Teferi, it hits Spell Queller, it hits all their counter
Jace the
spells.
Mind Sculptor.
Jace the Mind Sculptor. So I feel like Mystical Dispute's a really powerful card in this matchup for sure. I think a card that everyone forgets about and everyone was really hyped on too when Stoneforge Mystic got unbanned from Modern is Culligan's Command.
Yep.
Culligan's Command is really good in this matchup. But be wary of Spell Queller because Spell Queller will blow you out really quick.
Yes.
You go K Command, 2 to your Stoneforge, blow up your Battle Skull. They say Spell Queller. I think you just pack up your cards at that point because it's very depressing. And then they have a Force Negation, so even when they tap out, they still have counters up. They're a hard deck to beat. So I say Mystical Dispute's a great card. Ashiok could be too as well. Ashiok Dream Renderer, but she's kind of slow at 3 mana. 3 mana sorcery speed too, because you have to go on your turn.
Especially against a control deck, is that something that you want to be? It could shut off. It does shut off Stoneblade because it can't search.
Can't search for fetch lands.
I'm saying Stoneblade. It's Stoneforge.
Stoneforge
shuts off their fetches and all that.
Yeah.
So that could be good, but I think if you're on the draw, it's not as good. Obviously, they get that first turn before you even get a turn.
Yeah.
On the play or whatever, then I think that'll be good to bring in. I would argue that Culligan's Command will probably be the best sideboard option because it allows for a better 2-for-1.
Yeah,
killing
blow up potential kind of
killing
thing.
Stoneforge, taking out an artifact or whatever.
Yeah,
and then Mystical Dispute is not far behind. Outside of that, do you think there's any really other options? I was kind of looking through like my sideboard, and I'm like, I don't really know if this would be that good against them.
So I have an oldie but a goodie, and it was actually from about a year ago when we started using it. I know people kind of forgot about it, but I would start arguing that we should start playing Rise and Fall in our sideboards again. I know that's an older card, but if you guys don't know it, it's a split card from Dissension, I believe is the set it was released in.
I think so.
But it's a split card, so Rise is a black and a blue. It's a sorcery speed, and it says return target creature card from a graveyard and target creature on the battlefield to its owner's hands. And then Fall A target player reveals 2 cards at random from his or her hand, then discards each non-land card revealed this way. So I think the biggest thing in this matchup is we need to shred their hand. We can't let them have a hand. We need to attack that hand as quick as possible and make sure that we just annihilate them. Leave them with everything that's useless and stuff like that, because I don't think we can win counter battles with when they have no wins veto. That kind of just says, you don't win this, I win. They have Teferi to shut down our counter spells as well, an instant speed interaction. And then Spell Queller with Teferi, we can't cast a spell ever. Because if you guys aren't aware of this, when Teferi's in the battlefield and they Spell Queller your spell, and then let's say you kill a Spell Queller, you cannot cast that spell because Teferi says you can only cast spells that are like all your speeds are now sorcery speed. All your spells are sorcery speed, so therefore you can't cast the spell for free anymore. So it's gone forever, which sucks a lot. So Rise and Fall kind of allows us to have this tempo advantage of bringing a card back to our hand from our graveyard that we've thought scoured over or has gotten or died in combat or something like that, maybe a Snapcaster. But it also allows us to return the Germ token that is produced from the Battle Skull, because we can return that to their hand, and then the Battle Skull goes away and becomes an equipment, which is kind of a cool tempo play, because then they're stuck kind of re-equipping it or bouncing it back to their hand, then putting it back in the battlefield with Stoneforge Mystic, so it buys us more time. And then the fall part, again, hits their hand as hard as possible. If we can empty their hand, that'd be great. And I think Rise Fall is a great sideboard card for that, you know.
And I was going to say, I think Inquisition and Thoughtseize are usually pretty important pieces of the deck, but I think against that deck, that those cards become the most important it's ever been, because when you think about some of the other decks, like if you play against Jund, you might take out Inquisition or something. Like some decks, you might take out some of your Inquisitions, but in this style deck, I think you have to keep all of these in, because you have to attack that hand. Otherwise, they're going to start to run away with the game, because they are going to have way more resources than you will ever have with GDS.
They're going to dominate the mid to late game. You cannot get in that. You need to hit them hard on their hand. And I think I said hit hand like 7 times, by the way. That being said, there's also another card that is kind of a modern classic that everyone knows about, Liliana the Veil. I don't think the negative is that great in this matchup, targeting them, getting rid of Stoneforge. You know, it can be good if that's the only creature in the battlefield. You have to be aware of Ice Vein Quaddle. There's another card we didn't talk about. That card's pretty good in this matchup because they can just flash it in, save their Stoneforge, they draw a card, and then you kind of got blown out.
And if they trigger Death Touch.
And then they can block our Shadow, a Gurmag Angler, and trade favorably. You know, that being said, keep on plussing Liliana, and their hand's going to shrink away faster and faster, especially with our discard spells. We can leverage that and leverage our tempo with a Gurmag Angler, a Death Shadow, or a Snapcaster, or a Royal Scion to start ticking up to put pressure underneath them. I think getting rid of their hand is the most important part of this matchup, because you cannot win mid to late game. Because once Teferi resolves, they're going to run away with Jason Mind Sculptors and Battle Skulls and Spell Quellers, you know. And beware of Ice Vein Quaddle, because I've gotten blown out many times by attacking into it. They flash it in, and then I just kind of get blown out. Speaking of blown out, Veil of Summer is in this deck as well. So again, this matchup is like pure hell for us. That being said, the cards, a quick summary, is Mystical Dispute, Rise Fall, Ashiok, Culligan's Command, and Liliana the Veil are the cards that I suggest bringing in to help fight this matchup.
Now here's a question for you. If this deck continues to be on the rise and starts becoming one of the top decks, would you suggest trying to find a place in your sideboard for Rise Fall?
Yes, 100%. I believe it. I know people are going to clown on me and call me a fool. But again, coming back to what we said earlier, experimentation is good. And it was a card that was played a little bit. You know, last year I think it kind of popped up a few times. But I think the fall part is very important. And then the rise part, bouncing back that germ token so their Battle Skull gets shut off and turned to equipment, feels pretty good as well. You know, granted they could re-equip it onto a Spell Queller, which turns into a nightmare for us. But that's very slow and cumbersome, and it tempos them more than tempos us. You know, so I would try to find a spot for Rise Fall. I like it. I think it's a solid card. It's kind of a bummer I don't see anymore. I thought it was a really cool to include. It's the closest thing we have to Hidden Turok for GDS, you know. So I like it. Again, this matchup's rough, though. I do start recommending running Lightning Bolt 2 in the sideboard, so you're able to hit Stoneforge Mystic. You know, get blown out by Veil of Summer, too. and it hits Spell Queller without, you don't have to trigger Revolt or anything. Just hit it for 3 and call it a day. So Lightning Bolt's actually a pretty good.
Or hits or planeswalkers.
Hits or Planeswalker too. So Lightning Bolt's actually really good in this matchup. 1 to 2 bolts in the sideboard would not be if Bant Stoneblade is big in your meta. I think that 1 to 2 Lightning Bolts in the sideboard would be pretty useful.
And I think I've seen Michael Rapp posted not too long ago what he would run if he was running 4-color Shadow, Grixis Death Shadow. And he was running 1 Lightning Bolt in the side, and that's been an interesting card to kind of see its progression with Death Shadow. I mean, when I first started, when I was, I think, on Esper Death Shadow or something, I think you were running like 3 Lightning Bolts, and that was like stocked around like 3 or 4 in the main board.
I was going after, or going off of Ben Jones's, or Ben Friedman's old list, where it was like 1 push and 3 Lightning Bolt. Because like Snap Bolt, or Bolt Snap Bolt was like a real thing in Grixis Death Shadow. Now it's kind of like back in the golden days.
Yeah. And then slowly Lightning Bolt just got pushed out of the main board, and then for a while it wasn't even run main board or sideboard. Now it's popping up a little bit with 1 in the side. Like you said, that is really important because Veil of Summer will just completely blow us out.
Yeah, it's a tough card to compete with. Like I said, the 4-color matchup has a little bit easier time because they're able to bring in their own Veil of Summers, so they're able to win those counter wars a little bit easier. That being said, there's a sword for everything. I think what's the sword that gives protection from green and black?
Yeah, they're running that one as well.
So then they can go find that and equip it, and then you can't attack your Tarmogoyf into it. So they can shut you down on pretty much all levels, right? So if they go get Feast and Famine, they shut down Death Shadow and Tarmogoyf and can block them for days, and you can't attack into them at all. So I feel like they're geared to hate on shadow decks. If Amulet Titan never goes away, which I don't know if it will at this point, but if Veil of Summer gets gone and Once Upon a Time, and then we're stuck with Bant Stoneblade becoming the best deck, I think it's going to be a real problem, and we need to start looking towards the older, or not too old, but the older tech that we used to use to fight blue-white control, to start fighting against Bant Stoneblade. Because Liliana stripping their hand is a house. You Thoughtseize somebody, and then you Inquisition them, and you Liliana. That's like 3 cards out of their hand in 3 turns. So I feel like we need to start pushing towards hitting their hand. Speaking of which, Duress, that's a real sideboard card. Yep. Duress was a big thing that Brandon Dalloway used to use in his sideboards, I believe. And it hits Teferi, Jace, Big Teferi. Sometimes I've seen pop up in those lists. It hits their equipments that sometimes float around their hands. Hits Path, all their counters. So it's a real sideboard card for sure. And it's only 1 black, which is very important for GDS being that very efficient deck that we are.
And one card we have to look out for their sideboard is Celestial Purge. And that's definitely really good, obviously, against Grixis Death Shadow. It's still really good against 4-color Shadow, but obviously can't hit Tarmogoyf. But against Grixis Death Shadow, that could really just blow you out. Taking out a Gurmag Angler, taking out a Death Shadow for 2 mana. A
Liliana that you resolve too, that you think is okay. A Royal Scion that you think is okay.
Ashiok, whatever.
Ashiok, those are all gone with Celestial Purge, so be wary of that card as well. Also they play Supreme Verdict main too. I've been seeing a lot of lists run like a 1 of or 2 of Supreme Verdict, and that cannot be countered, so be wary of that card. So don't commit too much to the board sometimes, because if they get that Verdict out and you get blown out of the water, it feels very bad. But so there's the Bant Stoneblade matchup. Like I said, in summary, Mystical Dispute, Ashiok, Liliana, Culligan's Command, Duress, and then Rise Fall is my own little spicy one that I'm testing out, and I'm having a lot of success with it. But if it sucks again, you can just blame me. Say I'm the one who did it, who messed up, But I think Bant Stoneblade is a deck that we have to watch out for sure. And especially with the Spell Quellers and Ice Fangs and all stuff like that. It's a great deck, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And if Amulet gets nerfed with Veil of Summer and Once Upon a Time bannings eventually, knock on wood, I feel like Bant Stoneblade is right there to take its place for sure.
And I do think, even though it can be hard to play against as a GDS pilot, I really don't want to face against it. I am glad to finally see Stoneforge Mystic kind of get its place in the modern meta.
For sure, yeah.
It got unbanned, and then everyone thought it was going to kind of run away with the meta, maybe run away, and then we kind of struggled to see it. Like, it popped up in some decks, but it really didn't have too much success. It had some success. And I know that even though if I face against this, I might cry a little bit because they're just going to counter everything that I play. I am happy to see Stoneforge Mystic finally see place in a really good deck.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I think everyone had their hedges on like a Death and Taxes style build, like how it is in Legacy when Stoneforge Mystic got unmanned, but then people were like, Death and Taxes and Monitor isn't that great at the moment. So I'm really glad it found a home in this cool Bant shell that used to be Oko dominated, but now it's obviously just a cool blue-white tempo deck that controls the game and can finish it out really grindily too. So like it's Zora's Control. It's almost like, again, it's like a Jund. It's a Bant Jund. As weird as that sounds, just great cards mixed together that create a very lethal way to finish the game, for sure. So I think that's all the topics we have today, Jeremy, if I'm correct.
Yep, that's it.
And we'll be back next week with some new information. I was actually able to talk to Julian Grace Martin, who piloted GDS at SCG. Was it Philadelphia?
Philadelphia. We talked about him last week on the podcast. He finished 12th place. He's the first Grixis Death Shadow that was up there.
Yeah, the lone GDS player in 12th place trying to represent the whole entire community. So I had a chance to speak with him and talk shop with him and everything, and he was able to give me the lowdown on the tournament and some questions I asked him about Amulet and about the matchup and how it is in the big competitive scenes and stuff like that. So next week we'll be back and we'll be talking about all about that and getting some information to you guys, as well as some new updates on the SCG Classic going on right now in Indianapolis. We're going over those results and some other news. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. Have a great day.